Thank, thank you, everyone. I just want to make sure first, are you guys able to see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So it's great to see everyone. I do wish we were in person. I know everyone is over being stuck at home. But it's great to be here. So thank you for having me as today's speaker. And I just wanted to start just with an opening. When Lynn asked me to speak to the group today, I was thinking, well, what do they want to hear from me, right? It's property management, but she brought up some really good points, and there's a lot of things that are parallel with property management and just business in general. So my goal today and the time that I'm spending with you is that hopefully everyone in this group can walk away with one piece of or a tool that you can use in your professional life to leverage other people outside of just what you're trying to manage on your own. It's very easy to, be in a business profession and try to take on everything yourself. And my encouragement to you is that you lean on other people so that you make the best use of your time. So based on that, I wanted to do this in person, and so maybe like virtual show of hands. Don't hit the raise hand button in the Zoom meeting because that's going to trigger a lot of things. But just with the audience that we have, I know we're all at different businesses and different professions, but just curious, how many of you guys, how much of your job revolves around solving problems after something has already gone wrong? You could do just like a little, yeah. And keep your hand up, your virtual hand, if you will. If people regularly come to you because you are the responsible one, my hand's still up. And if yours is up, you might also be, the oldest sibling as well. It kind of goes hand in hand, right? With leadership and people who are always the responsible one. And the last question that I'll ask you guys is, do you ever take those things and those responsibilities and those problems that you've thought about a work problem and carry it with you after hours, even when there's nothing you can do about it in that moment? I'm going to raise two hands because that is my life. I go to bed thinking about problems that I need to solve. So, my hope is that, you can take something away from this that you can apply in your own business, whether it's real estate, whatever it is that you do. Because that lingering mental load that we have at the end of the day when we're carrying all of those things in our head, that's stress. And regardless of the world that you work in and your profession, I think we can all relate to that, right? Like it lingers with us and we carry it with us. So how can we leverage other professionals to help take some of that responsibility off of ourselves? So my goal today is not to just focus on property management, but also how you can think about putting into place the right buffers and the right people between you and the chaos in your life and your business. Property management just happens to be a really clear and relatable example. So that's my goal. Hopefully, you guys get something that's not just about, property management and what we do out here in the real estate world. Um, Everybody's still able to see my slides. Sorry, like they're not showing up on my screen, so I want to make sure everybody's good. Thumbs up, everybody. Hopefully, you're good. Okay, sorry. I want to talk about stress, right? Stress is real. I think we all experience it on some level. And it's about responsibility. It's not about the difficulty. Stress isn't about how hard something is, it's about who owns the outcome. And in property management, at the end of the day, a lot of that falls on the owner of a rental property. So I know in this group we have some real estate professionals, we have contractors, and we may even have some people who aren't in that world at all, but they own rental properties. So they can relate to this a little bit. When it comes to property management, most of the rental issues, they're not always complicated, right? We're not going to use this past week as an example because there have been some extreme things that have happened, but just on a day-to-day basis, it can be as simple as something like a leaky faucet or a running toilet or just an ongoing issue that's small but irritating to a tenant. It could be a missed rental payment, right? It can be a complaint from a neighbor. You may have a tenant who causes a lot of problems. Maybe they have kids who have parties and things like that. So while they may not be big, they can often occur on a regular basis. And if you're someone who is trying to self-manage that while also manage the other parts of your life, it can become a little stressful. You guys, I'm going to say the S word a lot in this presentation, but the goal is obviously how you can take some of that stress off of yourself and your business. So these things add up. And what makes them stressful for rental owners isn't necessarily like the problem itself. It's about if something goes wrong here, that responsibility is on me, the owner, right? I'll give you an example. I recently worked with an investor. He runs a very busy business here in Memphis, he's got a lot of employees who work underneath him. It's a very successful business. In fact, some of you guys may know him, but confidentiality, obviously I can't talk about that, but he owns several rental properties. Like most investors and rental property owners, owning rental properties is not their sole job. This particular owner, he had 7 rental properties in addition to running a very demanding business. Owning the rentals didn't overwhelm him technically. What overwhelmed him was the constant switching of roles. So he's running his business. He's taking care of his employees, making sure that his full-time company is running smoothly, and then having to switch over into um, moving into the home life, right? So, having to jump into the other roles that you play. So you're a dad, you are you're a husband, you're a soccer ball coach or whatever it is, in addition to running a business and having rental properties, right? So all of those things and having to jump between those responsibilities can cause stress. And so ultimately, this particular owner, he didn't fail at managing his properties. He simply became burned out, right? It wasn't so much that he couldn't do it or he didn't have the knowledge or the ability to do it. It was the capacity and the constant switching of what I do during the day and how many directions that he was pulled into. So at the end of the day, when you're a property owner and you're self-managing, you are always on, regardless of all of the other expectations that you're expected to meet throughout the day. So just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and also just how it can be an interruption, right? Like if you're a business owner and you're caught up in your day-to-day responsibilities plus your home life responsibilities, um, having constant interruptions that can interrupt the flow of your day-to-day, it can wear and tear on you, right? It can exhaust you. So picture this, right? You're in a meeting. You're this business owner that I'm speaking of, for example, or your own business owner. And I know a lot of people on this call have their own rental properties, so they can probably relate to this a little bit. You're doing your full-time job. All of a sudden, your phone rings. It's a tenant. They have a maintenance question. It could be something simple. I'll give you guys an example. I was helping a local investor a few years ago, working through flipping and getting a property ready to sell, and there was a tenant in place, and we were kind of in between like official property management, so I was the go-to point of contact. My phone rings, and the tenant is talking to me because she has smoke coming through her wall. My first thought was, did you call the fire department? So it's just, there's always this overwhelming possibility of a disruption at any point during your day, whether you're, meeting with your employees, you're on a job site, you're at dinner with your family, you're at your kid's soccer ball game. It's a constant potential interruption during your day-to-day activities. So even if you don't respond right away, it's not always as urgent as, smoke coming through the wall. It could be something smaller that you don't have to necessarily address in that moment, but that thought is still there. And that interruption still lingers in your brain because you know you're ultimately going to have to address it. So whether it's something extreme or something simple, it's still there. And one of the advantages of a property manager is it removes the owner from that interruption loop. They suddenly become that point of contact, taking the owner out of the scenario. Will the owner find out if it's something major? Absolutely. But do you need those constant calls for something tiny? I was even talking to a property owner yesterday. She has a tenant who was upset about the ice outside, right? This particular owner I know runs a very busy business, but in her head, she had to spend so much time like, how do I solve this problem? And being able to put someone in the middle between you and that tenant and take that call and that disruption and that thing that just gets in your head all day is so beneficial for you. So if you can focus on what is the best use of your time by having somebody in the middle to be that first responder, and it's not you as the owner, is a great way to take some of that stress off of your plate. So it really comes down to if you're a strategic person, you're a planning person, you're a professional person, instead of having to be reactive, you can stay in your strategic mode. Instead of having to be personal, like, oh my gosh, I need to address this person right away because they're upset. You've got that buffer there, right? So you can still focus on the best use of your time, growing your business and allowing someone else to step in and take over and be that first responder, essentially. So just a couple of points maybe some of you guys can relate to. Um, Uncertainty. Uncertainty is definitely a stress multiplier, right? Like, I know when I wake up and I'm not sure what the day holds for me, which is pretty much every day in property management, I instantly feel stressed, right? Because anything can go wrong, especially like what we just went through this past week and a half. What are we on, like day 12, 13 of this weather? And some of you weren't on earlier, but I was telling a story. I've got at least two property owners right now who have had their roof collapse, right? Is it ice? Was it a burst pipe? We don't know, but we're constantly getting these calls. And it's not just like small damage. It's bad. I mean, these homes may potentially need full rehabs. So, um, yeah, it's just unpredictable. And so, kind of having somebody there who is prepared to handle those things as they come in, definitely helps alleviate some stress on property owners who, are self-managing. Because if you get that call while you're in your day-to-day and, oh my gosh, the roof has collapsed at one of my like properties, you have to stop everything that you're doing and respond right away. So, with someone in the middle to help kind of bridge that gap and come up with a plan before they even have to loop you in, that's another example of how they can kind of take that stress off of your plate. In most professions, stress goes down as experience goes up. You've seen the same problems enough that you know, like, it's hard to surprise you in your regular business. It's not the same in real estate, right? Like anything can happen at any moment. So this combination creates a very specific kind of anxiety. And it's not always like, is this going to be expensive to fix? But am I handling this the right way? And I'm going to go back to the owner I spoke with yesterday. They had a tenant very upset, hey, this ice isn't working. I need you to fix this. And the owner, who is a very successful business owner, is like, I really need to focus over here, but I have this tenant who's very upset about this. Did I do enough? Have I covered my bases? Have I met my obligations as a rental owner? And so having someone who knows what is required versus what might be requested is another level of just comfort that you can have knowing that you don't have to worry about those little things. And did you meet that obligation and that expectation? Rental ownership is tricky. Issues, even if you don't have them regularly, when you do have them, they can be unpredictable. They can have a high impact. As I mentioned, ceilings falling in. That's huge. That's really, really big. Not only do you have to think about, oh my gosh, the cost of the repair, also, what am I going to do with this tenant who is potentially displaced now. They can't live here. So there's so many bigger picture things that you have to think about that pull you away from what's really the best use of your time. And again, having someone in the middle to help kind of take that off of you is a stress alleviator, right? It's a way to kind of keep your brain where it needs to be and having someone who's going to bring you in when you need to be involved. And what lowers stress isn't always avoiding costs, it's just certainty. When someone with market knowledge, regulatory awareness, and pattern recognition says, here's the right move and here's why, as an owner, you can relax. Even if it's not the cheapest answer, it's still that peace of mind knowing that you are doing what you're supposed to do and what you're required to do without overthinking, did I do enough? Am I at risk? And things of that nature. So, um, okay, sorry. I'm just making sure my slides are moving forward. I'm used to working in like Google Meet, so thank you for your patience. Another thing where a property manager can help reduce uncertainty, and again, I'm tying all of this back to like taking stress off your plate, right? It's stressful enough what we do day to day, and you add this extra layer on top of it of you have tenants, they have expectations. Are you actually meeting and doing everything you're supposed to do? Another way that a property manager can help reduce uncertainty and stress for you is pricing confidence. I'm going to talk about pricing for a minute because this is huge when it comes to rental properties. I talk to, on average, 10 to 20 property owners a day. And that's not even counting the people that we manage. This is just incoming calls, right? Like they all have different stories. I've listed my property for rent. I've wanted to self-manage. I've had it listed on Zillow for 30 days and I've had two people ask me about it. That's stressful, right? When you have a rental property, most of the time, there are costs associated with keeping that rental property up and running. Vacancy is expensive because most people still have a mortgage to pay on that house, right? You're still paying utilities, all of those things. So when it comes to pricing a property that you want to lease, you want to make sure that you are exactly where you need to be. Just like our realtors on this call, I know they can relate to this. If you don't price a property correctly right out of the gate when you go to list it, chances are you lose those initial like potential leads and the house is going to sit. So it comes down to strategy. So this is one of the biggest areas and stress points for owners. I've recently talked to an owner, I'm going to say an owner, but truthfully it's multiple owners. They want to list their home at a higher price for rent and then work their way down. That's not always the best strategy. In fact, I'm going to say that's typically not the best strategy. When it comes to having a property that you're listing for rent, those first 14 days on market, much like if you are selling a home retail, are the most critical. So I'll go back to this owner, for example. He wanted to list his home about $150 over what the market data supported, just because a neighbor nearby was able to rent at that amount 6 months ago. I think we can all admit that the market changes, right? It's never always the same. That's why your realtors are going to look at comparables. They're going to pull market data for you. And if you price too high, that property is going to sit. So in this example, this home sat for over a month with no serious applications. So by the time they finally agreed to adjust the price, they had already lost more in vacancy, like more money, right? The cost of vacancy, than they would have gained in that higher rent that they were hoping for. So that's where a property manager adds value. We're not pricing based on hope. We're pricing based on what the market is actively saying today, not what it was saying 6 months ago. Definitely not what it was saying 12 months ago, because we are in a different market, both retail and rental. All of that is just to say owners don't fear being $50 off. They fear being wrong for months. I like to explain pricing like this. if a home is overpriced by even $100 and it still sits vacant for 30 days, that owner doesn't just lose $100. They lose an entire month of rent plus momentum in that market. And that's huge. The flip side is underpricing might lease quickly, but then that can create long-term regret when you realize you left thousands of dollars on the table over the course of a lease. So a good property manager lives in that sweet spot. We're going to use real-time data showing activity trends and adjusting strategy quickly so owners can price with confidence instead of guesswork. I tell owners all the time, tenants shop for homes the same way buyers shop for houses. I just said it before, but the first 2 weeks on the market is when you're going to get the most attention. If you miss that window because your home is overpriced, you're chasing the market instead of leading it. So again, at the end of the day, most owners aren't worried about being $50 off. What really worries them is about staring at an empty property for months, wondering, what did they do wrong? So that's where market knowledge and pricing strategy from a property manager can protect both income and an owner's peace of mind. So, and feel free, guys, like I love participation. If you have questions and if you want to like stop me, raise your hand, have feedback, I love that. So don't feel like you have to wait until the end. Just wanted to put that out there. Where does a property manager reduce uncertainty? There's a lot of areas that I want to cover here. One of the biggest hidden values of a good property manager is their knowledge of legal and compliance protection. Housing laws don't usually feel intimidated until an owner actually violates one. So another one, for example, I spoke with an owner who was trying to be helpful. Actually, let me make sure I'm on the right slide here. Sorry, guys. Here we go. I spoke with an owner who was trying to be helpful and transparent with applicants. During a showing, they mentioned that they preferred renting to a quiet professional couple because they thought it would be a good fit for the neighborhood. Completely innocent intent, but statements like this can fall into fair housing violations, and it can be interpreted as steering or even limiting protected classes. This is a dangerous area, guys. Even if you are an individual property owner and you are listing your own houses for lease, these things can get you in trouble. And different levels of it depending on how many properties that you own. But it's so important that you have a professional who can guide you and protect you. Property managers don't just know the laws. We build processes, screening standards, and communication practices that keep owners compliant without having them having to like memorize those housing regulations. That's what property managers are trained to do. We're just going to help guide you through. It's okay to have a certain expectation of who you want living in your home. You have every right to say, this is my ideal tenant, but we're going to take that information and build from that with what we're allowed to say to help you find the right tenant without putting you in some type of, vulnerable position for fair housing violation, discrimination, that sort of thing. In this business, good intentions don't protect owners. Consistent execution does. So that is where the stress disappears when you are working with a professional who's familiar with these ordinances, these laws, and how you can say things and how you can't say things. A professional property manager is going to know what you can't post in a listing, right? You technically can't go on and say, I want to market this house to someone with no more than 2 kids, and you'd be surprised what I hear from owners. And I kind of have to talk them through that and like, let's talk about why that's important to you and how we can put this framework into keeping you compliant while also trying to find you a good tenant. We're going to protect owners from unintentional risk. Another area that a lot of people don't think about where compliance matters is tenant screening. A lot of owners think screening is just looking at credit score and income, but fair housing actually requires consistency in how applications are evaluated. I've had several owners, this occurs on a regular basis, ask me, hey, if you have two applicants who are approved, can I take a look at those applications and choose which one I want? The answer is no. And there's a lot of reasons why. I could do a whole other presentation on that, but it's our job to protect you from any type of potential claims of discrimination. So, all of that to say, a professional property manager is going to remove that risk by using standardized screening criteria, documented decision processes, and compliant communication with applicants. It's going to protect the owner and create fairness across the board. So, that legal confidence alone also eliminates a huge amount of that background stress. I'm talking a lot about stress in this presentation,
And
but
we've only got about a minute, so
oh
yep,
gosh,
yep,
I didn't realize I was running that far behind. I'm so sorry.
no
Um,
worries.
I will skip it to the wrap up. Let me just skip forward a couple of slides. There's a lot of things we do. We're going to handle all of the reporting, everything that comes down to rent collection. If there's ever an eviction process, all of those things. My goal in today's presentation was to, let me get to that. Um, Ultimately, the message is use leverage. Use people who can take some of the work off of your plate because it's what they specialize in, especially if you have your hands in a lot of different levels and a lot of different things as it relates to businesses. So that was my takeaway for today. Like property management is just a parallel. It could be any part of any business that you work in. Lean on the professionals who know the rules and can help guide you. So
Stephanie, how do we contact you?
I've got my last slide that I will put up for you. Can you guys see that? That is my direct phone number and my email.
Thank you so much. I think everybody, that